Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Tuesday, April 1st, 2025, episode 350, and we are all April Fools. All right, so April Fools, today I got tricked a couple of times. The one story about Warren Buffett buying Tesla for $1 trillion. I was the only reason why I got fooled is because people kept talking about how Warren Buffett was packing away all this cash, and people were wondering what could be for. And so when that story, when that hoax hit the wherever I saw it, I forget where, uh, I thought, wow, that's interesting. But I looked it up right away, as is my habit. And couldn't find any stories on it. And I slowly realized it was a joke. So April Fools, apparently, these days is for people who are gullible. And yes, I am gullible. But then that would be all of us now, right? It's not just practical jokes and hoaxes. But where does April Fools come from? If you look it up, you'll see that there are different stories. But the one story that is most often seen is a story from the 1500s when France changed the calendar that they were using. They were using the Julian calendar from Julius Caesar and switched it to the Gregorian calendar. And I believe it's one of the popes named after him, Gregory, I believe. And in the Julian calendar, New Year's Day was April 1st, and the Gregorian calendar is January 1st. But a lot of people were slow to make the transition to January 1st, and so uh, some people called people who are still celebrating New Year's on April 1st as the April Fools. At least that's the most often cited story. If you look on Wiki, there are a lot of different stories, and that is usually how it goes. After a certain amount of time, people come up with their story as to why that name or that expression came about. Um, Be that as it may, what it has become is just a day where you just basically play a gag or a joke or a hoax on other people. So it's about jokes and getting people to believe the joke. But many people are really gullible, through we know, though we know the history, we still believe a lot of the lies and the hoaxes, especially if you forget that it's April 1st. But even if it's not April 1st, there are lies, hoaxes, jokes, and most people believe them. Whether it's the cause of war, the reason we should all stay in our houses for months at a time, pseudoscience, cholesterol, ooh, good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, how long was that hoax gone on for? Crack babies. I think a lot of people still believe in the idea of crack babies, although no one really talks about it so much because people aren't using crack as they are using fentanyl. Nevertheless, people still believe there is such a thing as crack babies, and I think I talked about that before. So basically, if a hoax or a lie is more profitable, then it's perpetuated. In other words, the joke does not stop, right? So usually in April Fools, after a certain period of time, you just sort of say April Fools and the joke is over and everyone has a good laugh. But if it is really profitable, then the joke doesn't stop. It becomes fact, if you will. It becomes the truth. And people don't apologize for it too. After it comes out that all of it was a lie, it wasn't really true, and some people knew it all along, there are no apologies. There is no knee slapping laughter. There's none of that. Rather, it's just on to the next hoax. Other lies like the government cares about you, or the expression government efficiency, or how about they hate us for our freedom. I mean, these ideas or these expressions are just so absolutely ridiculous. And yet people believe them, for whatever reason. Maybe people need to believe in something. Uh, I've talked about it in several episodes, which is like the least viewed episodes that I make, which is when I talk about religion. And I just know people kind of roll their eyes and they say, I don't want to know about religion. But what is religion? It's just simply what you believe. And if you're going to be agnostic or atheistic or whatever, you still need to believe in something, right? You need to believe in something that will give your life meaning, a sense of purpose. Everyone needs it, right? Even the people who say that they don't, they have something, right? Perhaps it's even the belief that they don't believe in anything, but everyone must believe in something. And I wonder, is it that we are more gullible today, or are we more reactionary, right? Just look at how quickly people get mad. I used to be like that. I was really, really emotional. And then I realized it was because I didn't know anything. I was like really dumb. And so I realized that I have to learn more. I have to study more. I have to read more. And that was me in my 20s, right? I was just so hot-headed. I was so reactionary with everything. I would just go over the top with emotion, and it was ridiculous. And it was because I was stupid, right? I was able to get through life, high school, college, without really studying, like I said, because I had other things on my mind, like what about minorities in this country? Why do we have to struggle in the way that we do? And so I didn't really think about anything. And of course, doing research to figure that out never occurred to me, right? But I would just sort of try to work it out myself. But it seems but eventually I realized, oh, I can't live this way. I look stupid. I look ridiculous. I look silly, especially to people who know better. Right. And it happened to me so many times. And I would get so embarrassed later on when I realized that I was the idiot, that I wasn't as smart as I imagined myself to be, but that I was basically the moron in the room. And so I was so embarrassed that I realized I had to come out of that. But it seems that a lot of people dwell and actually enjoy living at that lower level of self-awareness and enlightenment, learning, call it whatever you will. And so we live now in a country that's going to pretty much believe anything, right? I mean, seriously, uh, not counting World War II, right? But think of all the wars that the United States has been involved in, and Grenada doesn't count, okay? Right. They even made a movie with Clint Eastwood, Heartbreak Ridge, right? I believe is what it was called, right? Except for those little things, right? But the large scale wars, what has America won? And don't be like some people I know who say US hasn't been in a war since World War II. And it's like, okay, yeah, I see what you did there. There was no formal declaration of war, so it wasn't a war, right? So we'll just call Korea a police action, right? Or it was the UN that did peacekeeping. All right, forget about all that. It was war. Just because you didn't declare it, I mean, there was fighting and people died. Okay, it was a war. I mean, think about it. Afghanistan, how disgraceful the ending of the Afghan war was, and how America left so many people behind and didn't care a pig's fart whether they would be hunted down and executed. I mean, it's just disgusting, really. But the memory of so many Americans who are such warmongers, as soon as the opportunity to go to war in Ukraine came along, I mean, they were just right back at it. It was insane. It's just, it's almost like a disease that exists with so many people here in America. Really, this appetite for war when America never wins. And I've talked about this several times before, but the corruption in the US military and the Pentagon and weapons development, the corruption is just so ridiculous that uh, militarily, technologically speaking, we are way behind Russia. I mean, if you know much about military history, you know that if you are in an actual war, you're basically getting combat experience, right? There is a big difference between people who have experienced combat, right? Veterans versus newbies, green troops, right? Rookies or whatever, people who haven't yet seen combat. There is a big difference, right? Because there's the training is very different from reality. And yes, I know everything I'm saying is in theory because I've never been there, but I feel like nothing I'm saying is wrong. Uh, so whatever as I'm saying is not wrong, right? And it's because of my conversations and things that I've read that I would rather not find out that I am in fact correct. Uh, but it's a very odd thing how in spite of recent history, like we could be, ignominiously kicked out of Afghanistan, people getting out by the skin of their teeth, and then say, "Oh no, no, but let's go do something in Ukraine." It's so crazy. And now with the whole Iran thing, the Houthis, I mean, we can't even bomb the Houthis correctly, right? They're still right because their whole thing is that they survived war with Saudi Arabia, right? The 10 years of Americans supplying weapons to the Saudis, and they still couldn't defeat the Houthis, but now the US all of a sudden using the same strategy somehow will be victorious. I don't know. It's just so weird, just seeing how people are so self-absorbed, so into themselves, so arrogant that they're so casual about other people's lives, about human life in general. It's very sad. But I think it's indicative of people who are of low intelligence. I mean, I'm not talking about how smart people are. I mean, people can be really, really smart, but to see, not be able to see the big picture and realize that all of this activity in the long run is just extremely detrimental to this country and to the world. I just listened to Gerald Salenti earlier, and yeah, in his colorful way, you know, he's why are we poking the Russian bear? I mean, that's a nuclear war there, but yet we have so many warmongers. It's almost like they're like, let's bring it on. It just it boggles the mind, really. Switching gears a little bit, I just wanted to go over this idea of tariffs tomorrow being Liberation Day. And it's hard to know what Trump is actually up to. He's constantly changing things. He says, "Oh, we'll bomb you," and then he doesn't bomb you, and then he doesn't talk about bombing you, but then he bombs you, and then the tariffs are on, then they're off. It's hard to know where he's going to go, and I guess that's the way he does things. But I don't know if this is the best way to lead a country. So back in episode 312, I talked about optimal tariff theory. Uh, but I also discussed elsewhere in another episode that tariffs are protectionist in nature. And one has tariffs to protect your infant industry, right? So your domestic industry is just trying to get off the ground. It needs a little bit of protection against cheaper foreign goods. And so you have a bit of protection. You're not shutting out the uh, outside competitors, you're just making your domestic industry a little bit more competitive so it can get off the ground. And so several people have said that tariffs are not 100% bad. There is an occasion, a situation where using them might not be such a bad idea. Well, the United States doesn't have much manufacturing. This is why Trump is trying to bring it all back, right? He's threatening tariffs, but he says if you build your factory here in America, then there won't be any tariffs, right? And so that's kind of what he's trying to do. He's using tariffs to try to get people to build their factories here in the United States so that we have some sort of domestic industry again. And the reason why it was so difficult for so long to have a domestic industry is because of the dollar, the reserve currency of the world. And because everything is priced in dollars, generally people who would normally buy American products can't afford it because the US dollar is generally stronger than their currency. And this is the other aspect of Trump's economic behavior is that he's trying to weaken the dollar. He tries to weaken the dollar so that more people can afford the domestic goods which will be produced here in the United States, right? So he's imposing tariffs so that domestic industry factories can get off the ground and for people to buy the products that are being produced by these factories, he needs to have a weaker dollar. And this might, in part, explain why he supports the continuing resolution, which increases spending by $2 trillion because he wants a weaker dollar. So, on the one hand, he's like, oh, yeah, let's cut waste. But at the same time, he's not really making a whole effort to return the money back to the American people or, just get it cut out of the budget because it would mean that the dollar would get stronger. And so you see that Trump is walking a very fine line. This is kind of what I was implying, what I was saying in the other episodes, where it's like Trump is so disappointing. Why can't he just do this? Oh, yeah, because he's trying to prevent the United States from having a sharp recession or stagflation. He's trying to, have some sort of soft landing, if we were to use their terminology. So there's that. But then we have to think about the foreign policy. On the one hand, he says he wants peace, but there's such a lack of principle. It's hard to know what he's doing, what he's going to do. He throws the word bombing so casually. Like, if you don't do what we say, we're going to start dropping bombs. And it irks me, right, that he just so casually disregards the implication for human life like that. It just, so on the one hand, he says he wants peace, but on the other hand, I mean, is he really that much different from other presidents? And it's always this bombing thing, right? And what is it? A question that I think Judge Napolitano asked Colonel McGregor in today's interview was if Israel asked the United States to bomb Tehran in Iran, right, the capital of Iran, would Trump do it? And McGregor said, yeah, they would, because Israel is in control of the U.S.'s foreign policy. Maybe am I anti-Semitic for saying that, for just simply repeating what other people have said? I don't know. Maybe Uh, but these countries that the United States is threatening to bomb and have bombed are not a threat to the United States. They will become a threat to the United States if we keep treating them in such a way, right? Because the economy right now, as I just mentioned, is not that strong. And if the dollar collapses, the United States collapses, and then what, right? All those countries that we took a dump on, all of a sudden they start looking at the United States and taking advantage of the United States. I mean, it's kind of a stretch, but you can kind of see a world where the United States becomes a much larger United Kingdom, England, where everyone just kind of ignores you. There was an interview, excuse me, after Trump talked about bombing uh, Iran because they're not agreeing to some nuclear deal or whatever. They go over to Iran and Judge Napolitano showed this clip where the leader of Iran basically says, yeah, they talk about bombing, but I don't think they're going to bomb us. But if they do bomb us, then we're going to make sure they're going to regret it. And they interviewed a military guy afterwards, a general perhaps, where he says, the United States is living in a glass house. They have 10 bases with 50,000 personnel around Iran. Ooh, no, 50,000 is a very small number, but it's a significant number if they all die. And that's what Iran is basically saying. Look, if you threaten and to do something to us, you think those 50,000 soldiers are safe? They're not safe. And Colonel McGregor even said that those positions are indefensible. They were not easily defended, particularly against Iran. And if you have forgot already, remember, Iran basically showed the world that they could bomb Israel, right, with missiles with impunity, right? They have a strategy, right? They throw up all these cheap missiles, right? And then we have to use anti-missile missiles to shoot them down. And after we run out of ammunition, out of missiles, that's when they send in the good stuff. And there's nothing to stop them, right? So those bases, those 10 bases, are just sitting ducks. And that says, and we haven't even really talked about all of the naval ships, right? They cannot defend against hypersonic missiles, which Iran has now, right? Which they used against Israel already, So it's just this very weird thing where one has to wonder, does anyone watch the news? Does anyone take seriously what happens all over the world? So I think this is why I think that Trump is dancing a very thin line. He has to appear to do one thing just so he can manipulate people into doing the things that he needs them to do so that he doesn't have to actually do anything aggressive. You know, uh, how he stirs the pot, I don't know. It just bothers me. Um, but when he does stir up the pot like that, all the people who love to hate him, they just say, see, see? And there's no interest in trying to understand what might be actually going on, which is what I just shared with you with the whole tariff conversation I just had with you. So, I mean, think about it. We're all April Fools, right? Why is Europe talking about war with Russia over Ukraine, which is already a war that's over? Um, Trump threatens Russia with more sanctions. Can Russia be punished more by the United States? I mean, they're pretty much cut off now. The U.S. is dependent, rather, on Russia for the uranium and other materials. How can you punish Russia? Why, when we are militarily weak in this country, why would we promote war with China? Who thought bombing the Houthis was a great idea? That is just boggles the mind. And then I saw a story of the IDF killed 15 UN aid workers. And you know that their IDF is saying, oh, they weren't really aid workers. But see, this is the thing, right? It There is a way of presenting that information where it looks like America and Israel are really, really in the wrong. If we did not get involved with foreign entanglements, right? This military adventurism, it wouldn't be our problem. We wouldn't have to defend anything, right? People would be responsible for their own actions, and whatever happens, happens. You don't need to start talking about anti-Semitism or anything like that. People who are going to take risky actions, then they have to take responsibility for what they did. That should have nothing to do with the United States. Uh, So this American arrogance is on a collision course with reality, right? The April Fool, gullible mentality of the United States. is on a collision course with reality, especially if the dollar quickens its decline, right? So we got to stay cool. We got to continue to live lives that are principled, right? And living and sticking to a principle like freedom, property rights, whatever, you will quickly figure out what is probably the better option, the better choice. And it reduces the amount of criticism that people can throw at you because you are being consistent on a very good principle. So hopefully soon um, we can get out of this April Fool mentality and instead be ready to help people when they need it. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.